Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, the American response was characterized by a strong sense of anger and resolve, rather than fear. The phrase "Remember Pearl Harbor" became a rallying call, igniting a wave of strong patriotism throughout the entire country. A total of 5 million men willingly joined the military, but the need for additional soldiers arose due to the war being fought on two fronts. Consequently, an additional 10 million men were conscripted. In order to handle the large number of new soldiers, numerous military bases and training centers were constructed throughout the country. The bases were strategically placed in areas that had a warm climate and plenty of open land to make it easier for training and housing. General George Marshall, who served as the Army's chief of staff, led the effort to mobilize the armed forces. He was responsible for making sure soldiers were trained well and helping to create the country's military plan. Marshall suggested employing women in the military to fulfill non-combat duties. In response, Congress established the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps, WAC, in 1942. This initiative enabled women to serve in various positions, including nurses and pilots. Besides women, individuals from minority groups, both men and women, also contributed to the war effort. African Americans had different feelings about protecting a country that often treated them as less important citizens. However, many viewed the war as a chance to combat discrimination and receive acknowledgement for their contributions. More than 1 million African Americans served in units that were segregated based on race. However, they were not permitted to participate in combat roles until the year 1943. Mexican Americans, Asian Americans, and Native Americans also joined and played important roles in the war. The United States was more prepared for World War II compared to World War I. The government used different strategies to gain support from the American people and ensure the country's success in the war. Propaganda had a major impact on shaping public opinion to support the war. The government utilized posters and films as means to disseminate patriotic messages and mobilize public backing for the war. The film industry created movies that were patriotic and also provided light-hearted entertainment such as musicals and romances. These movies were meant to offer moments of relief from the difficulties of war. The government was determined to prevent the high inflation that occurred during World War I for economic reasons. In order to address inflation, the Office of Price Administration, OPA, implemented price freezes on a wide range of goods, effectively preventing any increases in prices. Furthermore, Congress increased income taxes in order to decrease consumer spending and maintain control over inflation. These measures supported the war effort and ensured stable prices. The War Production Board, WPB, was created to make sure that the military and war industries had enough resources. It decided which companies would make war materials and distributed raw materials accordingly. The OPA also implemented rationing in order to effectively manage limited resources. Families received coupons for necessary items such as meat and gasoline, which ensured that goods were distributed fairly. The majority of Americans worked together with the rationing system and took part in recycling efforts to support the war. The United States Merchant Marine played a vital role in delivering goods to the war fronts, making sure that American products manufactured in factories reached the soldiers stationed abroad. The Office of Scientific Research and Development, OSRD, was established in 1941 to engage scientists in the war effort. They created different technologies, like bombs, guided missiles, and medications such as penicillin. One of the important accomplishments of the OSRD was its contribution to the creation of the atomic bomb as part of the highly classified Manhattan Project. In general, these efforts and preparations aided the United States in effectively managing and contributing to the war effort in World War II. The United States went through a big change in its industry and workforce during World War II to help with the war. Factories throughout the country swiftly changed their focus to producing goods for war, and different industries played vital roles in supplying the military with necessary resources. The automobile factories that were making cars for regular people began producing airplanes and tanks instead. Even industries that were not traditionally associated with bomb production, such as pencil manufacturers, adapted their operations to manufacture bomb components. Shipyards and defense plants increased their capacity and played a significant role in the quick production of warships and other military equipment. Approximately 18 million workers were hired in war industries to fulfill the rising labor requirements. Approximately 6 million women joined the workforce and played a crucial role in it. Women performed different roles during this time, such as working in factories, serving as nurses, flying planes, and undertaking non-combat military duties. The Women's Auxiliary Army Corps WWII was created to officially include women in the military. Additionally, the war effort provided chances for minority workers who had previously experienced discrimination and exclusion in the defense industry. Defense contractors hired around 2 million minority workers, including African Americans, Mexican Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, and others. The minority workers played important roles in manufacturing, supporting the war effort, and demonstrating their abilities despite facing challenges and prejudices. The United States was able to produce a lot of war materials during World War II because industries and workers came together and worked hard. This helped the Allies win the war. The changes in the country's industry and workforce also had long-lasting effects on social and economic factors in the period after the war. During World War II, although the war effort created opportunities for women and minorities in the workforce, they still faced discrimination and challenges in various aspects of their lives. African Americans, in particular, faced systemic racism and segregation, limiting their access to equal opportunities and rights. A. Philip Randolph, an influential African American labor leader, threatened to lead a march on Washington to demand an end to discrimination and segregation in the defense industry. To avoid such a protest, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 8802 in 1941, creating the Fair Employment Practices Committee, FEPC. The FEPC required employers and labor unions to end discrimination based on race, color, creed, or national origin in hiring and employment practices in defense industries. While the war did open up new job opportunities for African Americans, especially in the industrial Midwest, they still encountered discrimination and prejudice. Civil rights leader James Farmer founded the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, in 1942 to fight against discrimination and segregation. Mexican Americans also faced discrimination during the war years, as seen in the Zoot Suit riots of 1943. These riots involved violence against Mexican American youths by white servicemen and civilians in Los Angeles, reflecting the racial tension present at the time. Native Americans, despite many volunteering for military service, continued to face challenges such as being denied voting rights in some states and having their reservations reclaimed for military bases and weapons testing sites. The war also caused important changes in family relationships. Due to the large number of fathers serving in the military, women had to join the workforce in order to fill the gap in labor. This change affected the usual gender roles and had an impact on the movement for women's rights in the years following the war. World War II brought about social and economic changes in the United States. It created new opportunities for some people, but it also made existing inequalities and discrimination faced by minority groups more apparent and lasting. The war had a lasting effect on society, which prompted ongoing endeavors for civil rights and social justice in the period following the war. During World War II, the United States enforced a policy of internment on individuals of Japanese descent, particularly Japanese Americans. This was done due to concerns about possible spying and sabotage. The policy was motivated by fear during the war, racial bias, and a fear of foreigners, rather than concrete proof of wrongdoing or disloyalty. After the Pearl Harbor attack, government officials were worried that people with German, Italian, and Japanese backgrounds might have connections to the enemy. Although Germans and Italians were also interned in large numbers, the treatment of Japanese Americans was notably harsh and extensive. President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066 on February 19, 1942. This order allowed the government to forcefully relocate and detain people of Japanese ancestry, regardless of their citizenship. More than 100,000 Japanese Americans, both citizens and non-citizens, were forced to leave their homes, businesses, and communities and sent to internment camps in various parts of the western United States. Japanese Americans faced harsh conditions in these camps, which were enclosed by barbed wire and overseen by armed soldiers. The families lived in small spaces, and the people there had to deal with bad weather, not enough things to use, and not many chances to learn or work. These individuals were never charged, and no evidence of disloyalty or espionage was discovered. The Supreme Court's ruling in the case of Korematsu v. United States supported the legality of the internment policy, based on the idea of military necessity. However, this decision is now widely acknowledged as a serious error and a breach of civil liberties. Following the war, the Japanese American Citizens League, JQL, worked to raise awareness about the unfair treatment and sought compensation for those who were interned. President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act in 1988. This act gave an official apology and financial compensation to Japanese Americans who were interned. The government gave money to the surviving internees to recognize and deal with the serious wrongs done to them during the war. The internment of Japanese Americans is a regrettable part of American history. It shows how policies based on fear can be harmful and emphasizes the need to safeguard civil rights, especially in times of national emergencies. It reminds us to protect the rights and dignity of all citizens, regardless of their race or ethnicity.